Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, January 8th, 2020 Planning Board for the town of Raven. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call.
Mike D'Arcangelo.
Bruce Sanford.
Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Ed Kranich.
Kevin Woodbury.
The board works from a published agenda, and since this evening we have no applications to review, I'm going to dispense with the normal reading of the intro stuff. Today's planning board will only be a workshop. So we'll start with item 2 on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes. We have a series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 months worth of minutes to go through. These are the official minutes for all of those meetings are the video recordings. So unless there's objections from anyone, Vice going through each one and figuring out which one we can vote on and which one we can't, I'm going to make a motion that we accept all 10 of the back minutes into the record, and unless there's an objection.
Well, the only discussion point I have is that I wasn't back on the board until the February 13th. 2019, so if we bundle them all together, I have to abstain for the three I wasn't here, and then
We're not going to vote.
Oh, we're not?
No.
Well, we're going to do
no
the
objections,
record.
we're going to just accept
Oh,
it as a
okay, all
record.
right, fine.
Is that
Sounds good.
okay?
I'll second that.
Done.
That was quick and easy.
All right, the next then we have is a long list of the proposed ordinances. And while I don't want to discourage any comments, in fact, I appreciate comments, also, if we could get through as many of these this evening. The timeline that I am looking at is a March public hearing, which means on the February board, our next meeting, we would be looking at the proposed draft copies back from legal, or at least the copies that have gone to
They would
legal.
be back from, we would present you with all the red line markups,
Right,
and we could drive as many as we can through legal at
Legal,
that point.
right.
And,
So-
and see if they have any conversations or comments on those until we have the final public hearing and the final article written.
right.
But then it goes to the Board of Selectmen, and they may actually do something, take it further.
Okay, so that would be our schedule. Keep it in mind as to where we're going, and I think we've got 13 or 14 of these.
Yeah, and some of these we've
Pretty
already
simple.
done. Yeah.
Yes, right.
So what I did is tried to give you kind of a summary. I itemized them. Each of these will be an article eventually, and just try to give you a little update of the bullet item as what we've done, where we're going to be going with it. For instance, like item 1 was to change the subdivision to site plan order to promote street connectivity and public acceptance. We've actually already drafted that. You reviewed it. Next article piece of that will be to put that in article form for the next meeting. So we really don't need to do any action on that one.
Perfect.
The second item I actually have over here, which is to amend the review criteria. I'll give you a handout. I know you've got a bunch of them already. If I can find the right one. Maybe I did give it to you. Here's accessory. I've got too many. So where are those?
I don't think so.
Nope, right here, I got it.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. On the back side of this, you'll see the piece I added, but this is up front, right in the Article 1 of the subdivision ordinance. When you get it, you flip over to the back side, you'll see in red what we added. Try to keep it as simple as possible, but the idea was, when you go through all these criteria, this is what the board actually votes on when you approve a subdivision, and there's more than just O, but I just kind of stopped. We just added what was in red such that you and the applicant are very aware you need to comply with a net residential area. It should be acreage.
It should be
Acreage.
net residential
Acreage. Area. We'll clean that up. But
Okay.
again, this is just for discussion points this evening. That's what we want to add to. And I was thinking that this could be a whole separate item, but then it seemed to make some sense just to fit it under J rather than making the ordinance even longer. But the idea was to make everybody aware that that is a requirement and pretty substantial piece of a subdivision ordinance.
Yep. And just as we're going through here, Jim, this, this could almost fall under an admin change because we're not changing anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a technical change, and
Right.
we can have that discussion too, whether we want to take a whole bunch of these and bundle them into one article, rather than having separate articles. We can have that discussion after we go through all
Okay.
this, how we want to bundle these, because there's a few of these that are going to be like that this evening.
All right,
And whether we want to bundle them as, like you said, administrative changes,
right.
or whether, and maybe that'll also come out of the BOS meetings as well. So that's all it really is, that one is. That's a very simple change.
Okay.
The next one is a little bit more complicated, and I will pass this one out so we can kind of keep this flow going. This has to deal with the village residential, and we got into this, I think, with one that Dustin Roma did, one of the more recent ones we did on 302, where we had complications of understanding how the density works with duplexes and single families when we've got combined uses. So again, on the front side, just for your reading, Greg, you can see we added timber harvesting.
Okay.
At the end of the permitted uses, we added timber harvesting, and we did that for all the zones. I just didn't present you with all the different zones, but we did do that. But on the back side,
Is that something we really need to do?
timber harvesting? I don't know.
Yeah, all right, just
There's only a couple guys in town.
Yeah,
who
keep
really
Somebody
know.
else.
You'll sit next to him, he might poke you.
Oh, he does that all the time.
On the back side, though, and thank you, Mike, for helping us with that language. We took language that came right from Mike over there, which was to delete 2 and 3 under minimum lot area dwelling unit, and kind of created a new one, which it does kind of, I think, simplify the sequence of how you calculate that, because the way it was before was a little bit confusing, and I think that simplifies it and makes it a little more straightforward. That is, for a structure with more than one dwelling unit, duplex and multifamily, the first 2 units will each require 20,000 square feet per unit on the lot, and then for each additional unit will require 15,000 square feet per unit on the lot. That simplifies it. Before, it was very confusing when you had mixed unit types. So that's all that would address in that one.
But the fact that we're adding timber harvesting means we really can't do this as an admin,
This one, no.
No.
This one would have to be a
the separate one.
separate
Okay.
one. Maybe I'll make a star of the ones that we want to.
Yeah, all right, well, I'm keeping a track of it here.
Okay, perfect. All right. Going on to timber harvesting, you already saw we did that. We've added that to the end of each one, and that one can also be a technicality. One thing we did add to that is permits must, when we did the use, we just put in parentheses, permits must be acquired to the Maine Department of Conservation, because they're not issued for the timber harvesting.
Okay.
Accessory apartments, I've got that one here too. And we just really attached this one to the definition in the zoning ordinance. And again, this one might fall under administrative. And this had to deal with, when we're dealing with accessory apartments, is it a unit, is it just another bedroom? So it's always confusing. I think it comes up more with you than it does us at the planning board level. But for the purposes of lot size, net density shall not apply for a single family home adding 1 accessory apartment. So in other words, if you have a single family, it's a single family. If you add the accessory unit, we're not asking for an additional acreage of lot.
Which is just kind of before, it was just given rather than anything
Yeah,
written
it's just
in there.
cleaning it up,
Yep.
basically.
So I got a
Because
question
the
there.
unit's only 700 square feet for the accessory unit. It's the max size for accessory apartment units.
Are these just attached to the main house, or are these also separate?
They're
can be separate.
detached or attached or detached.
Okay.
Are we only allowing a single accessory apartment on the lot? Let's say that it was a 55,000 square foot lot and it had 3 dwellings on it, because 20,000 for each of the first 2 and 15 for the next one. Does that mean each one of those 3 can have their own apartment? Or just one apartment for the
No, I
entire
think
lot?
where if you looked at how it's written in the ordinance,
That's the definition, but I think
but
they
I would know,
don't.
but if you go, not the definition, but if you go where,
Well, we could only have one dwelling per lot though, right?
yes.
Right,
So,
But it does say in there that only one accessory apartment is allowed.
right, no, but it was, if we
So
only
it's
have
just
one
one house
dwelling,
of the
right.
three can have the apartment. Not all three can each
Right.
have their own
Correct.
Right.
apartment. Okay, all right.
And you're thinking this is also an admin change,
yeah, I think it's just clarification.
application?
And when we do up the, what we'll do is when we do the article, we kind of give them a little bit of a paragraph blurb of what it's clarification or revision or an addition, so this one would fall, I think, under clarification.
What's the second bullet, confirm against density for septic system?
Well, the only question would be that, I mean, that's kind of a Scott question when he gets the building permit, but in some cases, if the lot, I don't know if we have any in that case, but if the septic system has to be, the lot has to be a certain size to adapt to the number of bedrooms.
Yeah, it does. Well, yeah, it basically, I mean, for an accessory apartment, it's considered a minor expansion under subsurface wastewater rules. So if they only go one, if there's, this accessory apartment makes it go one bedroom over what the system is rated for, they don't have to put in the expansion, but they do have to have a drawing or a design saying that they have the ability to put that on that property in case it fails.
And in some cases, if we get small lots, you can only put so much septic per lot size, but I think that falls more on him for that building permit than it would be on us for guidance as far
What
as.
about
that
water, wells, same well,
Nothing addresses the water
Yeah.
at all in those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
typically they pull them off the same well.
same well.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not even gonna touch sprinklers on that yet. Next one we had, which is penalties, discussion, and legal language revisions. That's you with the town attorney.
Yep, basically what we had in our regular ordinance was outdated, listed it as a misdemeanor, and the fines, basically what we did is just took verbiage from shoreland zoning, which addresses it through, I don't have anything in front of me right at this minute, but it basically 30A, as far as how the fines are dealt out, it's just, it refers back to that section of main law as to how the fines are dealt out, rather than get into what we have in there. It was just, like I said, misdemeanors no longer,
So we're gonna delete all of that out.
delete all the misdemeanor in that
Yes.
and just say, I had it printed out, but I don't know where it went. Yeah, because we had it that one day. I had it red marked.
You did have it red marked.
Yeah.
I don't know if you passed it out or not. Was it-
Nope, I did not.
But we did receive, in the short, we did receive the necessary language from the attorney,
Okay, that's fine then.
and we'll present that in the red line form to you at the next meeting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything you're gonna challenge with the attorney on that one, for fines. Next one is, similar with the town's attorney, which we are still waiting on, I believe, on that one, is the sign ordinance to allow certain signs in conjunction with constitutional rights for First Amendment, freedom of speech, all that kind of.
Yeah, because I think we discussed it last time that there was a
A little bit, yeah.
Supreme Court decision that changed how you have to do your sign ordinances. And basically, Phil was supposed to be writing something up, will be writing something up for us to address that.
Okay.
Okay, the next one gets into peddler's license, and I did give you, you'll say peddler's ordinance right
Yep.
at the top,
I
handwriting.
saw that.
And the only section we really want to address, which we've kind of left open for discussion, really has to do with the time of year those licenses must be issued. And it becomes quite a burden for a lot of businesses that want to run food trucks or peddlers, because they are, according to our ordinance, have to be issued annually on May 1st. And the submissions have to be no later than April 1st. And unfortunately, in our procrastination world, that doesn't work for a lot of people. They don't even think about it till June or after Memorial Day in some cases. So how we want to address that, do we want to put another date? Do we just want to eliminate the date? I don't even know, do we have a sense of how many peddlers license applications we potentially get? I know we get requests after May 1st,
First, yeah.
but up to May 1st, do we
Yeah.
ever usually get?
No, not before then. They usually come in after.
Do we know why that language is there to begin with? The dates? Any idea?
I don't know.
Do we want to make it a time period for review? Or they have to submit it 30 days in advance?
Well, that seems to be what that was, the intention was 30 days, because obviously they submit on April 1st and the board decided on May 1st. I mean, we
Right.
can go with 30 days in advance, or as directed by the Board of Selectmen. That's not even our license.
Would it be a staff review for that license, or is it?
As it right now, it's reviewed by the selectmen and issued by them.
But we would, there would be some input from fire departments, right, emergency response, whether or not, at least that they get notified, right, that the event is taking place. Is that what we're, I mean, well, I guess not. It would, to be just a peddler's, it'd just be a food truck, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, there'd just be,
Yeah.
just a,
Is there a licensing fee associated with it?
Yes.
there is, I'm assuming it's probably 35 or 25
And
around
the-
that area.
Yeah, and the peddler's license is about 10 the whole ordinance is about 10 pages long. And I didn't bother giving that all to you.
Good.
It's $250 for residents and $500 for non-residents.
A lot more than I thought. Okay.
And have we talked to the selectmen about this at all? Do they have any feelings one way or the other?
I had brought it up to a couple of them. They kind of showed some interest that it be changed or be allowed to be changed as far as the timing of it. Because I've run it, like I said, I've only been here 3 years, and every year I've run across the same person always asking me about May or June 1st, if he could get a peddler's license, and I try to.
So is it, so
I like Ed's idea.
Ed's idea that we could just, I could just modify the language to say that there's a 30-day wait period from the time you submit to the time, or at least 30 days, or the next available meeting with the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Minimum of 30 days is what I'll put.
Minimum of 30. Yeah. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so instead of having a date where they, in time where they have to submit, they can submit whatever they want, but they gotta wait at least 30 days.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think.
Do you want to put anything in there that, on the, depending upon the meeting schedule?
Yeah, I think we have
Just
a
a-
minimum of 30 days or next
sufficient.
available meeting, it gives the Board of Selectmen the opportunity, because if they have a full agenda in 30 days, they may bump it.
Right.
So I think that's kind of standard protocol, but we can work out
Okay.
something with that.
Does the application license for a food truck have to coordinate with the health department or anything? Is that part of the application process?
Well, I think
They gotta
that's part of
show
it in there, yeah, that
approval
they-
by health department?
Yeah, we may have to add something in there if we looked at it, that it be licensed from the Maine State Health Department. That might be a requirement that they provide prior to. Can't remember exactly how that's
But they
worded
must
in
have some
there.
certificate, right? Health certificate.
Well, there is,
The
yeah, I
restaurant
think there's a
right?
mentioning of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes through that, it goes to insurance, that they have to have insurance as well.
So the application process is pretty extensive.
Yeah, I mean, that could be added into the application itself, not necessarily in the ordinance itself that they
Yeah,
have.
right, just if you have a form they have to fill
Yeah.
out, that should be part of the form.
Yep.
Does the ordinance address location as to where it can and cannot be?
No peddler's license shall be issued for the sales of goods on private property located within 65 feet of any fixed-based retail establishment offering the same substantially similar good unless the owner of the fixed-based retail establishment is also the peddler's license applicant.
Can't put up a taco stand in
You
front of.
can't put up a taco stand in the
Mexicana.
parking lot of the Mexicana.
But what about in the residential district, the parking lot in the residential district?
Can you do them in the residential district?
I don't know if it really addresses
I don't
that.
think it addresses that, Bob. It's kind of an obscure ordinance. It's, you probably all have it. It's under miscellaneous in your ordinance books. But it really doesn't have anything, just says description of the location in which goods will be sold and a copy of the lease agreement or other documentation providing the landowner authorization to utilize described property for sales of goods. Fee. I don't see anything about Well, can you do it in a residential zone?
Yeah, I don't think there was any specification in there.
Yeah, because it says, I mean, the one here says, it's good on private property. So,
Because I don't know if that would address like somebody having a party and then a food truck, or somebody was selling, because when this was written, there were no food trucks at that time.
right, and now they're very popular.
Yeah, so it's a question as to what was their intent on that. Did we really address it with the food truck? We may have to play around with it a little bit.
What is it?
Word-wise.
But what is a peddler's, does it fall under retail or commercial? If that's the case, then you couldn't do it in a,
Right, and if it,
somebody could obviously lease it and do it whatever they wanted, but they couldn't necessarily have it for the general public to come up and buy.
right, so if we exclude that whole area, then we've really, where are they gonna set up to begin with?
In the commercial
In the
district.
commercial district, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And, which is
Not bad, yeah.
not bad, which is
Right,
good.
right.
So, but I think we should confirm. But then, of course, we're excluding it out of what you were saying, the barn party that wants to have the food truck.
Which is another whole.
If it's a party that's not for sale though, it's basically, it's all paid for. so
Right.
People are just utilizing it.
It's like a
as
catered event.
kitchen
That's a
event.
good point.
It's more like
It's
a-
catered at that point.
Right,
Yeah.
So that's what I would I mean, I'm not code for us, but I would consider that if somebody brings in a food truck for an event, and nobody's paying, then it's essentially catered.
except we catered, right? Okay,
Yeah, it'd be okay.
If they open it to the public to come in at that event, then
That's
it's a different, it's a peddler.
right.
Is there any limitation on if they can set it up on state property? city
It does
parks?
talk about town property, but it does not talk anything about state.
So just as a hypothetical, somebody wants to set up a food truck. They want to set it up outside of one of our Christmas tree cutting operations during the Christmas tree season.
Ooh.
It's, yeah, on Egypt Road.
Yeah,
Is that acceptable under the ordinance? And if it is, do we want it to be acceptable?
Why not?
Well,
Well-
if we,
what is the use? Is the use is Christmas tree, what does that fall under? The agriculture?
it's agricultural, yeah.
I don't know if they go through the trouble for a 1-month season.
Well, I mean, I don't know either, but.
No, but I can see the use going hand in hand. I
Right.
can see those type of applications
And
coming.
I can see neighbors.
Or what about even like Maple
Traffic.
Sunday?
Yeah, right, neighbors and
Right.
traffic and, I mean, if it's a popular event,
Like to your point, it's a one-day event, but it's not a seasonal license. Do you want us to, we can kick the tires and see what some
Yeah.
other towns have in that regards. I mean, 'cause to your point, I think this peddler was more of a cart basis when this came.
Probably,
It was,
yeah.
it was really a peddler's license, but now with food trucks, you that kind of can expand quite a bit as
Right.
far as the intensity and use.
I mean, I have no objections opening it up, the licensing opening it, but I just want to make sure in doing that, we're not creating a problem.
Yeah, because we made almost, yeah. Because the other question is, do we have to define standards too for the food truck as far as trash?
Yep, trash
Water.
removal, water
Yeah.
facilities.
How does this, well, can I ask, how does the state handle that?
State just looks at the individual truck itself.
Truck itself?
It's up
They
to
don't
the
have to
individual.
have an outhouse or anything.
Nope, they're not required on any of those, on any of that. They're just, as far as they're required to pick up all trash.
Yeah.
They have to have trash cans within 15 feet of the truck, and they have to be picked up at the end of the day by the food vendor. So I mean, something like that, we may have to,
We'll poke around some other other towns' ordinances and see what they have, because food trucks obviously are a
Right,
very
so I think this one we
growing
need kind of,
operation at this point.
So is it true under our current ordinance that there's no, you can have a food truck anywhere in commercial or residential? And the only reason I'm asking is I'm just kind of thinking worst case scenario where someone on like 302 in the summer, even though it's, it's not commercial, maybe it's just private property, but they think, oh geez, I'll set up a food truck here and make some money or something.
yeah, I mean, that could be one of the restrictions that would be on commercial property. I mean, it is, and unless it's, like, again, unless it's catered.
And maybe that's something we can worry about if it happens and not worry about it right now, or?
Well, it's something you want to toss around. I mean, I'd rather be prepared for it
Yeah.
rather than fly by the seat of my pants when
Yeah.
somebody comes in for something like that.
Yeah.
Especially if we're gonna rework the ordinance, we might as well rework it
Hmm.
so that it works. And I would think parking might have to come into that as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah. See, like because one of the gentlemen that wanted it, you know, some areas they're able to park on the grass and not take up any parking at all.
Mhm.
It all depends on where I mean, that might be, again, and like you said, there's probably more to it than
Just change it to.
just changing that
Yep.
section.
I mean, the application requires a sketch plan, signs, all the amenities that they have on the, in this case, it mentions cart several times, but obviously now we're into trucks and it limits the occupant space is 150 square feet. So 10 by 15, yeah, I guess it could be a truck.
The other thing too is I noticed what I see a lot too are trailers instead of trucks now.
Right.
So I don't know if they're, might have to define.
So let me go back to the drawing board on this one. See,
Yeah, we'll kick the tires and see what's out there.
Yeah.
One of the things on the food truck is if they had a grease hood in, should be inspected just like all of our other places that have grease hoods. So it should be inspected for that, inspected and cleaned. So.
yeah,
Would those guys that sell like Easter flowers for a couple weeks every year, would that fall under peddler too?
Yeah, the word peddler, I mean, the definition is right here in the front of it. The word
It's not
peddler
just
is,
food.
yeah, as used herein shall include any person selling or offering for sale tangible commodities, including food, beverages, and non-food goods, wares, and merchandise. The word peddler shall include the words hawker, huckster, street vendor, itinerant vendors. The definition of the word peddler for this ordinance does not include, but is not limited to the following exceptions.
so when the Lions set up their Christmas tree sales, do they get a license for that? Do they go?
Probably, my guess is probably no, nonprofit, but.
Yeah, they may be waived as a nonprofit. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but that would, I guess, be something else.
You know.
Those tree hucksters?
Tree hucksters.
All right,
right,
we'll
not to
do a
belabor the
little more
point.
background on this one.
Yep.
All right, where'd that leave us here, this whole big thing? Truck vendors, we're on to number 9. Okay, special events license development standards requirements based for inquiries of barn weddings and events, and I think you have some information on that one?
Yep, we have the Kennebunkport.
Yeah, I would give you a couple of models there. Going through some local towns, we, from what we can tell, we don't have a mass gathering ordinance. And I know we discussed this as far as barn weddings go, but I think what we as staff have felt is that probably should just, barn wedding really opens up another whole layer to this whole issue. Our feeling was, let's take the first step and get mass gatherings, because when and if we do get into barn events, there's only one town that I could find that actually had a barn event, which was Cumberland. And I know it went through a lot of public debate and argument, and I'm not sure even how it's worked out or if they've had any additional users utilize that. But I think first and foremost, we just thought that for special events, that one in Kennebunk seemed to be, most of them deal with groups of people 500 to 1,000 or 1,000 and over, which I don't know how many events in Raymond we have of that size and magnitude. I mean, we were kind of throwing out, you know, the ice derby,
Yeah.
you know, those type of events, but I don't know if we get into anything of that substance of size. The one that you have in front of you from Kennebunk talks about 250, which, if there's an event of 250, that's probably starting to get to the point where it's becoming, it could be a nuisance if it were.
Yeah, held regularly, certainly.
Right, you know, whether somebody's having a charitable event or some kind of, I don't want to say concert, but, you know, some kind of planned event. when you get to that 250 in a town like Raymond, I think that's where you start to see some complaints probably start deriving. So again, we didn't really give you anything in red line yet. We just kind of want to open up the discussion of what your thoughts are. Do we need it? Do we not need it? Should we look into it deeper? And the biggest, toughest point for us was, what is the threshold that we should be looking at? And like I said, for most towns I saw, it was 500 and 1,000 were the thresholds. Kennebunk was one of the few that I saw, it was 250.
I think one of the issues there is you look at Kennebunk or Wyndham or
Yep.
Gray, they're more concentrated municipal areas than we have. They're gonna have
Right.
larger lots for parking, and Raymond's all spread out and it's small
Yeah.
and rural, and so I think if we do this, we're gonna have to consider a much lower threshold of population, or we're gonna run into a space issue.
Right,
you know,
and I think
right
that's
away.
why we suggested the 250, because that,
Yeah.
again, that's one of the lower sides for a mass gathering. You know, then if you get into special events, do you want to have another layer where you go to 100 to 250 was a special event? Then you're going to start getting into everybody's wedding, everybody's reunion, you know.
Yeah.
Do we really want to get into that? You know, and I think our feeling was we probably don't.
Yeah.
But if you go to the 250 threshold, then that kind of will grab the larger ones, which could be a nuisance. And again, I'm not saying that 250 is a perfect number. It just seems to be an arbitrary number that, for the time being, makes some sense to your point, Bruce, based on the size of the town, the availability of space. Because when you have an event that big, people are going to be parking on the streets and blocking streets. You know, either that or they're going to be out in the field somewhere. And again, when they leave or exit, you know, what's that traffic control going to be like on a smaller town road?
Is this, as it stands, differentiated between a one-time event, like a wedding or a family reunion?
No.
Or a commercial thing where somebody's
And
having a
that's
wedding?
kind of where,
every
because I
2
know
weeks?
that there's been an application to the town that's gone through the Board of Appeals, and they've determined that the use was not
Was prohibited. Yeah.
prohibited in the residential zone. So, you know, we don't really, we know that's gonna be a much bigger discussion when that time comes, but I think this more deals with a one-time event. When we get into multiple events, when does it become a commercial use? And when does it become a planned event, a one-time event? And that's what our thinking was, that this would apply to a one entity or a one-time event.
One of the things to consider on this too is, even if nothing more, notifying public safety that these events are happening, so that we can be at least be in the right mindset. So if something happens, we know a certain amount of people are in town, and that's what we're responding to, and be able to start to formulate a plan to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's more, it's more or less, I know it says license in there as an application, but it's more of a public awareness and safety, you know, consideration that the town knows that that's going on. You know, in the event that something happens, or, you know, emergency or whatever in our crazy world we have today, that, you know.
Online application?
Why not just make that the ordinance? Just, and see what happens, and then you can, you know, make it, if you're gonna have an event that involves more than 250 people, make it a requirement that they notify the fire department.
That's essentially what that does.
And just leave it at that,
And that's what our thought process was.
and not have,
You take that one like they have there in Kennebunkport, it's really a very, I know it seems like a lot, but some of these
so much.
ordinances are 14 or 15 pages long. That one's too, and really condenses it down to, I think, the nuts and bolts, from what we could tell. And if you want to take a look at it and condense it down a little bit more, or change the format, that's fine, but, you know, I just found that one, I thought kind of got to the point of what we really need, especially if you look in the back pages there, I think it had it.
Yeah, it addresses the police if required.
Exactly.
I mean, that's,
You know, and
that's
it's
safe.
really good, giving the contact information, a number to call,
Yep.
you know, in case something gets out of hand, who's the responsible party, because, you know, if something's not planned, then you're never gonna find the responsible party, you may not even find the landowner, may not even know about it.
Now, are we getting out in front of this, or have we had issues with this, or other communities in the area?
Well, I think the catalyst was, we were thinking about the barn event.
barn.
When we looked at the barn event, all of them kind of revert back to following standards of the mass gathering. And then when we did that, we kind of, wow, we don't even have a mass gathering. So
Okay.
it's kind of the first step,
Step one, okay.
step one. And again, it would be, unlike a barn event, which would have multiple events during the year, this one is for that one time,
Well, singular event. which we
singular
don't-
event. And then if we like the way that this works, or we see that this is viable and used, go to the next step, which is maybe barn events if it becomes a large enough issue. But I was kind of surprised, going through various towns that we didn't. All the towns around us have something of that nature, and we don't, so.
Kevin, can we have an online application?
We could,
I mean, that,
yeah, I mean,
just to make it, I mean, the goal would be not to make it difficult for everybody,
Right.
but to get the word out to everybody.
Yeah, I
An
mean,
online
yeah,
application.
it's pretty easy to do.
We just get shunted to the departments that needed to be informed, right?
Right, yeah.
One of the things that would be handy is, on that whole response aspect that we were talking about, is a site plan, so that, we know that we got access, if we gotta get ambulances in, where people are gonna park, those type of things. So, and it doesn't have to be real detailed, but just a submission of
That's a good idea.
their site plan would be good. So we could have a discussion.
Yeah, and I think it did require under one, I don't know if it didn't print here, but I think under, it did require a sketch
Yeah.
of, the property and the parking, because that is one of the requirements.
And that's normal.
Again, I think parking, noise,
Yeah, that makes sense.
all the things that, and again, who knows, there may be some weddings out there that exceed that. I haven't heard of them, I don't know, we haven't seen them, but again, if people, they may be happening, we're just not recording them, that's all. But is it a time bomb that something could happen, then it'd be great to know. But I think to your point, Bob, it's more of just making us aware that these things are out there. And if they could be posted online too, that would be.
Yeah, we can do it online so that it's easy for everybody. It's not an ordinance. It's just something that can just get done because we want to know
Is
it's
there a
there.
fee?
Yeah, $25 is on this one.
$25, yeah, so again,
Right.
just a processing fee, just a,
Well, I wonder if we even need a fee.
No.
I mean, what's 20? I think collecting $25 is more of a nuisance than.
well, somebody's gotta look over the plan and,
I mean, like you say, they click on the
Part of the
online
text,
form, it
though.
goes right to somebody's email, and
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
there's really not,
I mean, we have a minimum permit fee anyway of $35.
if it's a permit.
If it's a permit, it's a minimum fee for a building or otherwise business.
but they could apply online and just come into town and pick it up.
Yeah,
It could be that simple.
that could be some.
I mean,
Okay.
if you have a wedding, and you have a liquor license, you could run into the same typical thing.
Right.
So I mean, that's the way I would handle it, they can apply online, just come into town to pick up the permit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because most of it is going to be dealing with them. There really won't be too much code-wise for me.
Right.
Other than something small like that. But
The only thing I think on that one, it had the chief of police as the contact here, it might revert to the fire chief, I don't know. They're probably the most, you're gonna be the one that's gonna be the
Yeah.
emergency response and everything like that, so.
Yeah, you have the town, this is the town traffic or crowd control.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if it was the fire chief here in this case,
Mhm.
makes sense. So we'll, if you like, we'll take that ordinance and we'll kind of work it in a little bit. I'll work
Yes.
up a draft of that.
Sounds good.
Greg, sound okay?
Keep it simple.
Yes.
That was one of the most, I mean, some of these were 14,
Oh, I
15
didn't, I didn't
pages.
happen to get that.
Oh, you didn't?
I can,
So I
I can,
didn't-
I
I'm
can
sorry.
give you those, Greg, to do with.
There you go. Sorry, Greg.
I don't need it.
Okay.
We're done with it.
Is that- oh, yeah, it's here.
I was
This is
I
one
was looking at
page.
your notes. cheating.
So the next
Page, you wanna
one,
read it?
It is?
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna skip one, because then I think the next two, actually, I'll skip 10, we'll come to 10 last, and then we'll come to 11 and 10, 11 and 12 first. 11, business license currently issued by CO to be amended to be issued by BOS. Scott, you're working on that with the Board of Selectmen. I don't think there's anything yet you need to do with that. That's probably gonna be a directive from the planners directly.
I'm sorry, I fell behind.
Oh, I went to number 11, item
Okay.
11.
So you skipped 10?
Yeah, we'll
Gotcha,
come back, we'll
okay.
come back to 10,
All
because
right.
that's got the video show here.
Okay, so now I'm okay with you.
Yep.
I just-
So that, Scott's working with the Board of
Okay.
Selectmen, and I think they'll probably come up with some kind of format, and whether it's a formality, it just comes to us, it goes back to them.
Okay,
Under changes to the ordinance, to revise the current section of land use that pertains to zoning board of appeals meeting. I think you may have already got that one handed out, I'm not sure.
I don't think. We have that one.
Basically, the language I was gonna use in that was, go back to the Board of Appeals, let me just check here. Oh, no, you don't, I have it. My bad. Yeah, this is kind of different because the planning board's meeting dates aren't in the ordinance, but the zoning board of appeals was.
They're not in the ordinance?
You know, the planning boards are at our discretion, but board of appeals had to be on the last Monday of the month. So it doesn't give them a lot of flexibility. So I just drafted, the Board of Appeals shall meet as needed and is routinely scheduled following the schedules and deadlines as established by the Board of Appeals annually prior to the effective calendar date. So as of tonight, you've got
Yep, so we can do the same thing.
they could do the same thing, and they just have to establish it prior to the calendar year. So they could move their date around if they seem fit.
Seems easy enough.
That works, man.
Yep.
So then if everybody knows a year in advance all the dates and submissions and everything, so. And even on that, you know, it talks about that they have the authority to reschedule as necessary. I don't know if we need to have that in there or not, but. Do you guys typically meet every month?
We haven't, been a while, which has been nice, but we were quite busy there for
Yeah.
first couple of years.
Again, just to kind of give them as much flexibility as scheduling, so. Helps with attendance, as you can tell.
And it gives them the opportunity to add if they need to, just like we can?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Technical changes.
what do I do with my schedule here? Moving papers around. Last one, changes. We'll redline these, and again, I don't know, we probably could bundle all the street technical changes into one thing. I added a couple in here that have come up. We discussed already the thickness of pavement, widening of shoulders for pedestrian accessibility. One that's coming up more and more is we're seeing the availability of LiDAR, which is the elevation data that's available online through satellite imagery, is that it's not always accurate, especially when we get into heavy canopy. And we've had a couple designs that when the contractors go lay it out in the field, it's off. It's off relative to itself, but still doesn't match in with oftentimes our street elevations. So what I would propose we do is that they have to at least ground reference that LiDAR to make sure it's accurate or make sure it's relevant to real NAVD datum. So that
What is NAVD?
North American Vertical Datum,
Oh, okay, all right.
USGS. And then the same with benchmarks on projects. You guys don't get into this a lot, but it would be very helpful if we were able to have benchmark listings on the drawings, especially site plans or anything we have streets on. We haven't been really pushing that, but again, when we get into a lot of the private roads, it's becoming a little bit of an issue to make sure that everything is on the correct data.
Okay.
And then another one where, looking at mapping down the road, more and more towns are requiring GIS coordinates on at least 3 points of the property, and that is to get into the main state grid, so all the mapping can be updated on the town's GIS and things like that. So if we get it on main state grid, that's one of the datums that seems all the towns are kind of tying into. So that kind of gets you kind of brought into, I don't know where all that data goes at this point, but at least we could have it on the plans, so that somebody could at least download it.
What would they use on that? Just the streets? I mean, because properties, their surveys are all meets and bounds, aren't they?
They're meets and bounds, but you can put coordinates on pins on three points of the property, and then you can tie them all into each other, so you have a more accurate tax map basis and plan basis. Because right now, you shouldn't rely on the tax maps. They're guesses at best. This helps to get it, more and more towns are doing that to get a more accurate start.
We had some mapping going on, but that kind of just
Yeah,
gone
Scott
away.
just reminded me today, he wants me to poke some people with that, so. And item 14 is dealing with submission materials. think the idea there is to get more materials, save us all time scanning if we were able to get, and it's becoming the professional standard more and more for requesting PDF versions up front. Saves the town scanning time and everything else, if all that's electronic, and then you can put it online much
It
quicker.
would make me so much happier.
Yep.
Yeah,
Because I will spend hours.
and on the flip side of that is when we get recorded drawings back, it'd be great to have those in electronic version as well, rather than just the plain paper copy, again, for records and mapping down the line. So those are changes that I think may have to go in the submission section of each one of those ordinances, but pretty, again, it's a cleanup item. I would consider it not really anything new.
Even requesting a PDF? Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
we
think so.
all, anybody who works in land planning these
Yeah.
days, PDF is the most simple. We're not asking for CAD drawings, and
Right.
for your standpoint, that won't take up a huge amount of space.
No, it's not a big deal.
No, but when you get into some of the CAD drawings, it could be, but PDF is just a nice electronic version, safe storage.
Yep.
What does the county use for their records?
Well, the county just shifted January 1st. They used to require a Mylar or plastic,
Oh.
basically, and a paper copy.
They don't do it electronic?
Now it's electronic. Now they've all gone, the state
It's CAD or something?
state statute just changed. They wanted PDF.
Because
There's so many
PDFs, can you
different
make,
CAD, there's so many different CAD versions out there though that.
they keep changing?
Yeah, you might lose lines if you grab it from one version to another, and the data can get manipulated and changed. Where if you go PDF, you've got it's a TIFF or a
Picture.
PDF image, I think is what they requested. So I think they still keep a paper copy and then a PDF.
I think PDFs are not to scale normally, right? If you take one and print it, it's,
Not sure how they're addressing
I,
it.
at least I encountered that when I was working, that a lot of PDF drawings, you
Yeah,
can't
but
scale.
typically you
It
have-
depends how you capture it and make it, if your CAD does it correctly, it will be to scale in the PDF. And then when you keep it PDF, as you scale it, will stay the same.
The good thing is all those plans that record are supposed to have a graphic scale.
Dimensions, yeah.
You have a graphic scale, but I mean, to your point, it'd be a lot easier if it were to scale. But I mean, we can put that in there, that a PDF to scale.
If that's doable,
Yeah.
It's very doable. I mean, a lot of them just automatically just convert it right over
Right.
from one drawing to the other. Let's do it.
yeah, it'd probably be good to.
So that concludes everything as far as everything but the sprinkler system. I know
And what
Wayne's
about
got,
we're gonna try for loop roads in this one?
that was the first item. The first time I said we've already addressed.
Oh, we've already got it, okay. So yeah, it's a little behind.
Yep, so we've already captured that one.
All right.
We have that red line ready to go. But our ideal is next meeting, we'll try to get as many of these as we can redlined so that we can present those to the public hearing for March. So the idea is to get these promoted as far along as we can so they're ready to go for public hearing on March.
March,
Yeah.
right. And Jim, the require widening shoulders for pedestrian accessibility in lieu of sidewalks,
Yes.
is that gonna be a planning board waiverable or set item, or, because we only do that for major subdivisions, right?
We're only doing it, well, we put it in for the cluster subdivision.
Right,
I guess that's a great question. Do we want to consider that a standard for major roads going forward?
Right.
Or, 'cause we don't have, I don't think we even have a sidewalk requirement at this point.
I think we have one that's not suggested, I think is what it, if I remember correctly, it's been a while.
This says shoulders. No, I think everything we have is shoulders. Looking at the street ordinance, page 9 of 19, everything discusses shoulders.
I remember discussions on sidewalks, maybe that was just a,
Sidewalks, there's a section for sidewalks, but I'm not sure. On page 10 of 19 in the street ordinance. It has a section that discusses what sidewalks should be made out of, but I can't see where they're called out to. No, the street sections, they don't call them out. Because if you're gonna have sidewalks, you're typically gonna have curbing. And I'm not aware of any,
I could be mistaken.
I'm not even aware of any subdivision, well, we haven't done any really new
Yeah.
subdivisions, but I'm not aware of any of the older subdivisions that have sidewalks. The only one I'm aware of that we've had recently is Rolling Hills had a walking trail along the road. It was a 5-foot, bark mulch trail, basically.
So do we want to do,
That's a great question. That'd be a board discussion we want to have. In lieu of just shoulders, do we want to have one side have basically a larger walking shoulder?
walking, bike riding?
Yeah.
For
I know we
me?
have it, we're gonna add it in cluster, but do you want to carry that across for, private roads or just for town accepted roads? Or minor
Minor roads.
up? Private roads are gravel, so I mean, it's not gonna do you much
No.
benefit there. But for all paved roads, would you prefer to have a widened shoulder?
Thoughts?
I mean, I live in a subdivision, we get some walkers up there occasionally. A wider shoulder would be nice. I think it would be a safety issue.
I think when you see more bikers, it's probably more prevalent for biking as
Yeah.
well. You go up, I drive Egypt Road a lot, and I don't know how people.
I don't know how they, it's crazy.
It's crazy
Yeah.
with the drop off on those shoulders, but, more and more of the state roads are promoting spaces for biking as well. I can ask, I can get some input from Nate. I think Nate would probably prefer the shoulder rather than any kind of formal sidewalk.
Oh, I think
Yeah,
so
they use it
too.
as
And I
a
don't
snow
thi-
shelf anyways, like on Cape Road, near where I live, I walk there sometimes, and there's a wide extra snow shelf that is
Yeah.
good for walking.
Yeah,
Let's move in that direction.
okay. There shouldn't be any more maintenance for the town or anybody
No.
to take care of it, just pushing the snow off the shoulder, but it gives people at least out of the line of traffic.
Yeah, they're not gonna want curbs to deal with. It's
And
better
most
just
of these are
having
small.
wider shoulder to
Yeah.
throw snow out.
We're talking usually in low trip residential neighborhoods, we're not talking Cape Road, 302, 85, major Egypt Road, those types of viewpoints.
Although it would be nice.
It would be. I mean, I like I said, I traveled down Egypt Road and I see the bike packs go up and down there. When they're on the road, you're not getting by. Because there's nowhere for them to go.
That's what the 3-foot wall is for, right? Didn't that fix all that?
Yeah, but when you got 20 bikers in the road, they don't go single file like
No, they
turkeys.
don't.
They don't go like turkeys single file. All right, we'll clean that one up too.
Okay. All right.
So the last one
Item
is,
10.
yeah, is to deal with sprinkler systems for larger residents. And Wayne, your show.
My show.
You got 2 minutes, Wayne.
30 seconds are already up.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. So what brought this about is we had a large residential home that was proposed and actually got a building permit to be built in Raymond. And we were talking 15,000 square feet of floor area. The fire flow that's required for a building of that size is astronomical. It's 3,250 gallons per minute to deal with that kind of a fire in that kind of a building. And then with a 3-hour duration water supply. So you're talking over 500,000 gallons of water on site that they would need for that particular building. The insurance company approached us, well, the owners did initially, and then the insurance company followed it up. And one of the things that was discussed for this property was a sprinkler system to reduce those fire flow requirements. So that's the driver for this ordinance is you start looking around and there are some very large structures in Raymond, and we really can't haul enough water to take care of those types of fires. And when we're in the where the public water main is, we have the ability to flow those kind of flows, but a lot of these homes are being built in areas where there's no public water. So that's the driver for this ordinance. I put together a PowerPoint presentation if the board would be willing to entertain that
Yeah, I was only
presentation.
kidding. Go ahead. You can have another couple of minutes, Wayne.
Well, and what I tried to do is in pictures kind of just show you why we're thinking about this change in the
Sure.
ordinance. So, you know, these are the kinds of homes that we're talking about. And what it presents is increased risk to the residents that are in the building. It reduces our ability, like I just mentioned, about us being able to extinguish a fire in these types of buildings. When you have a fire in these buildings, it's in a lot of instances, it ends up being a total loss. And then it's hazardous for us to operate and to try to rescue people or put fires out in these buildings.
If a building has sprinklers, does it require less total volume of water than what you would have to bring in trucks and pumps?
Yes, by 75%.
75% less?
At a minimum of reducing it by 75%. So, I mean, that's a
Makes a big
significant
difference.
reduction. And the reason for that is the fire's getting put out in the early stages before it really grows. So, what we have here, 10,700 square foot home, and the next few slides will actually walk us through them trying to attack this fire in this large residence. So again, for this one here, the fire flow, 2,750 gallons per minute for 2 hours. We're talking 330,000 gallons of water that you need on site if you were to do a tank or a fire pond. A little later on into the fire, you can see the fire is growing. More fire apparatus there, but the fire's still growing. This was a $5 million home with 16 rooms. Wow. The fire continued to spread. They're starting to flow larger flow of water, but it took a little while to get water moving to this because, again, these places are not generally on public water. Which I mentioned there. So, I mean, it's continuing to burn. And the cause of the fire, they believe, because there was such destruction, they weren't 100% sure, but they believed it was from foam insulation being added in the attic.
I mean, the foam insulation, what caught
Yeah,
up?
the spray on foam.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep. And Wayne, that was all because there was not enough water on scene, is that?
Yeah, it wasn't a sprinkler building, and basically the fire kept burning until the fire department was able to apply enough water on it to
Yep.
put the fire out. Some of the other issues that we deal with in these is access, and you can see from this picture, trying to get to these large buildings, we can't get close to them in most instances. They're out in our more rural areas of town, so response time, and you know, like this one, this slide here is showing this fire going, and the fire department's not even there yet. Wow. Another example, this one, 16,000 square feet, so very close to what we were presented with this year as far as square footage, and you know, there's your water supply, 3,500 gallons per minute needed for 3 hours, 630 gallons.
How many gallons does your tanker bring?
The 2 tankers we have are 3,000 gallon tankers. So you can see that that's a lot of tankers on roads that really aren't designed to take care of that type of thing.
So would this change the requirement for capacity of the well? If you're not on,
This would,
if you're on well water,
if they're on well water,
yeah. Lydia,
sorry.
it's all right. I mean, we're talking about a lot of water, right? So,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
I'm trying to
So-
understand your question, Bob.
Well, so the well pump has got a capacity,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you had that larger home, would a regular normal well pump
No.
feed that? No. So we'd have to,
And generally, even with the residential sprinklers we're putting in currently in our
Yeah.
subdivisions, it's not the well pump that's supporting that. They actually put in water tanks.
right? But you wouldn't be putting in a water tank. I mean, what would we be asking for a water tank size of a water tank?
If they put in a 13R system, which is that it's not a full commercial system, it's not the small system like we're currently putting in. It's 4 heads flowing 45 gallons a minute for 10 minutes.
Four
Because-
heads on that size house.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, we're not talking huge amounts of water that they have to have on site. The whole premise to the sprinkler system is get it in that very small phase, stage of the fire.
mm-hmm.
So they don't need to have huge amounts of water on site.
And what is the typical cost, say, for a 4-headed system?
The 4-head, I don't know. I can find that out for the board, what a 4-head is.
What are they running now for the normal resident?
6 to 10 depends on how complicated.
And then is there annual maintenance on that too?
Yes, there is. The sprinklers companies tell me that for a little over $100, they can come in, make sure the system's working the way it's supposed to in the event they have a fire. So yes, not bad.
Is there an industry standard for service, or would you establish one based on?
For the service, for servicing them?
Yes.
Yeah, just there is an industry standard, and that's once a year.
Okay.
To have the service technician come in and make sure that the system's operating properly. And that's important. Westbrook had a residential sprinkler system. They sent out the notice, hey, you need to have your system checked. And when the sprinkler company came in, they found the fire pump for that sprinkler system had seized up and needed to be replaced. And, that homeowner wasn't too happy with it at the time, but a couple of months later had a fire and made all the difference in the world. They got the people out of the building, the fire was kept small, so the maintenance is important. So one of the other things that we're dealing with that I mentioned is firefighters are getting hurt and killed in these types of buildings. So this example here in Lakeland, 7,500 square foot home, had 2 firefighters that had to be treated for heat exhaustion and 3 firefighters that the roof collapsed on top of them while they were fighting the fire. So, and then in this example, a firefighter died in this 8,400 square foot building. He was on the back side trying to go in and attack the fire, and he fell through the floor. So, this one here, this fire just happened just recently on the 27th of last month, and 6,500 square foot building. What's really interesting about this particular fire is they identified that they had no available water, and several months before this fire they put in a 30,000 gallon tank, which is much smaller than the fire flows that we're talking for these buildings. What happened with this fire is they used up the 30,000 gallons and the fire kept burning. And this kind of jumps along. It doesn't walk you through the whole fire. But this fire just kept continuing to grow and grow. They ended up calling 5 towns in for tankers, plus laying hose line a mile away to the public water system. And between those two things, eventually got the fire out. But at the end of this, you'll see there's not much of a home left. So this is our concern. We just don't have the capability for these types of fires.
Maybe we should restrict big homes.
Well, the other thing too, with these types of homes, you can see there's a lot of intricate angles and things for that fire to
Yep.
really get captured.
They're wide open generally. They have that wide open concept to them, and the fires just take right off.
So Wayne, what are our neighboring communities doing? Do they have such ordinances in place now, or?
They haven't dealt with the large home issue like we're proposing. The closest examples to this, Yarmouth has a 4,000 square foot requirement for their sprinkler ordinance, and Wyndham has a 4,000 square foot requirement for their sprinkler ordinance to deal with homes that aren't in, buildings that aren't in the protected by the public water
System. And
now,
Does
there's
Falmouth- I'm sorry, does Falmouth have anything as well? I mean, they have some large homes.
Falmouth has a sprinkler ordinance, much the same that we currently have.
But
And,
not-
and don't misunderstand me when I talk about the 4,000 square foot for sprinklers. 1 and 2 families are still excluded from that, okay, in those 2 towns.
The larger homes that in Falmouth, they have,
They haven't addressed it that I'm aware of. So, we tried to kind of put some pictures up to show you the different square footages that we're talking about. This is the chief's house, so we're talking 2,800 square feet, wouldn't be impacted. Bob, this is your house, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But, you know,
yeah, it is.
3,900 square feet, you wouldn't be impacted by this.
That's my house.
Ed, that's your place, 2,700 feet, you're not
I think
impacted.
it's my house.
This place is actually the ex-chief Dennis Morris's place, and this still wouldn't be impacted by this ordinance. Or this online rental on Dryad Woods Road. But 35 Meadow Road is at 48, I didn't have it on the slide, sorry. It's at 44 square feet. So this potentially could be impacted. And this is a big house.
Yeah.
7255 on Spiller Hill Road. Now, we have a 10,000 gallon tank just up the street from this, but
Yeah, was.
it's not gonna last very long. Sunset Chimneys, 11,000 square foot home. And you can see that open concept, the big wooden beams.
That's Bruce's place?
That's where, I think it's where he used to live.
Oh.
Tore it down and
You
built
moved
another
it?
one.
So, this is that home that we were talking about, and the, you know, the gallons per minute that we need for 3 hours, and then what you need for on-site water. The architect actually proposed trying to segment the building with rated construction, and he still ended up with a compartment, you know, a size of the building that was 7,500 square feet, and still needs 2,000 gallons per minute for that, just that section of the building.
So I take it putting in just a tank is a lot cheaper than a sprinkler system?
When you're talking a tank that's 300 or 500,000 gallons, I'm not so sure that it is cheaper.
You know, most of your cisterns that you see in residential neighborhoods are on the order of 20 and 30,000 gallons. Give you context. You need 10 of those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you have a copy of the proposed language, and this is just a starting point for the discussion. The reason we came up with the 4,800 is ISO, and ISO is the Insurance Service Office. When they calculate fire flows for buildings, for residential homes, when they get to 4,800 square feet, anything below that is 1,000 gallons per minute for 1 hour. Anything above that, they treat it as a commercial building, and we get into these larger flows. So that's where the 48 came from.
On the calculations for the building area, do you include garages and that now? Because I know for a living space, it's not included for taxes, but for fire, it would seem to bear, you know.
We haven't been, like when I showed the slides of places in the community, we weren't, with those square footages, we didn't include any garages for those square footages. Just the living area, yeah.
Those have to be compartmentalized anyway with
Right,
fire
the
rating.
garage has to
Yeah.
be separated with at least a 1 hour wall. So that's a help to us.
How do you make a 1 hour wall, just double sheetrock?
There's different ways to make a 1 hour wall, but generally it's 1 hour sheetrock, fire rated sheetrock on both sides of the wall. So some of the alternatives, really the only other alternative is have an on-site water supply. And that's a lot of water to ask somebody to put in. And the house that drove this issue, they're actually looking at that. You know, they're actually looking at making those smaller compartments and trying to put that amount of water on site. So.
Is that house on Windward Shore Road?
What's that?
Is that house on Windward Shore Road?
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to say or not. We kind of have a gag order, don't we, Scott? Oh.
We don't.
But yes, that's where we were. That's what drove this.
So just so the board is, I'm sure you're all well aware, the only requirement we have right now for residential structures is within the subdivision orders. So any new subdivision, we do require them to be sprinkled.
Right.
Questions?
Well, yeah, I got one for maybe Scott or you, is what are these people's attitude when they build a house that large? Are they aware of the risks? Are they willing to take the risk of, potentially getting into a bad situation?
Yes, most of them are.
Well, my
If they
concern
were,
is
I
just,
mean, if they weren't, they'd put it in no matter whether we asked for it or not.
Right.
they what?
They would put it in whether or not it was an ordinance
Yeah.
or not. So, yeah, most of them don't, that you run into. But like I said, we have a couple of them, we have some bigger houses where it's not required, but yet they're putting in fire heads in a limited area, which is like a mechanical room, and stuff like that, but they do it on their own.
So is it your sense that, in your view, that it's not good enough in terms of the number of people deciding to voluntarily put in a fire suppression system?
I'd rather not kind of give my opinion on that because it really shouldn't have any bearing on what you guys decide. Sprinkler systems do have their place, but like I said, I mean, they are asking for a certain size of house, not every house.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess my question would be, is at what point, from an economic standpoint, does, I don't know what the cost, say for a 5,000 square foot home, what the sprinkler size would be, but at what point is that extra burden not a burden? When you're building $1 million home, is a $10,000 or $15,000 sprinkler system a huge burden? No, but when you're building a $300,000 or $400,000 home, maybe it is, you know. Or a homeowner might look at it as a bigger burden at that point.
Right.
And I guess my other question is, where does this, how do the insurance companies play into this, and what impact does that have on the town as far as rates or anything like that, or does it have any impact on the insurance companies?
On these larger homes, that insurance service offices, the insurance companies look at the rating for the town when they're providing insurance. Not as much with residential as they do with commercial, but when you're dealing with a large structure, they're gonna look at that more as a commercial property, and they're looking for either insurance rates or protection to take care of that building.
And one other question I have is that some of these homes are there.
Yep.
How do you retro, or do you retro, or do you just capture the ones going forward? And when is an addition big enough that you say, okay, now you gotta bring and how does that work with any ordinance for that matter, or code? When do you gotta bring it into compliance with the rest of the newer code? Is there a percentage of construction or cost?
Usually it's, well, it could be size and or cost that could trigger it commercial wise. Again, like we have a couple of, we have a 3-unit house that's been purchased, and we have something in there that if they renovate it more than, I think it's 50% of its assessed value, if that's what they're gonna do, then they have to sprinkle the whole building because it's a 3-unit and it's not sprinkled currently.
Is that a normal, is that our terminology, or is that an industry standard, or a state standard, or a NFPA standard?
A lot of the retrofit language that we currently have, a lot of other communities have that same language.
Similar to shoreline zoning. With lots of flooding or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
And understand, our whole thing is not to sprinkle every residential home in Raymond. That's not where we're at. We're not there.
Yeah.
It's just this one this particular property is like, wow, we just can't deal with that. Which got us thinking about, well, what do we want to do as a town to take care of those situations?
Yeah, there shouldn't be too many more of those huge houses coming.
Well, we
Don't know.
we say that, but you know, I mean, you have a lot of conversions, homes that are taken down and new ones put up, and and that land value is only going to go up with not oceanfront, but with lakefront property. It's only going to go up, or with scenic vistas.
And we do
You
have.
know, I think what Greg was hinting at was that if you're going to live in a house that big, if you're going to buy that house that big, and you don't want to sprinkle it, then you're accepting the risk that's associated with living in a house that big that the fire department can't put out. And right, and pretty much. But on the flip side of that, I would say that when the fire starts, the fire department is going to respond. And one of the things, Wayne, that you did say, and I know that would be a fact, is that it is dangerous going into the fire, to fight a fire like that without enough water suppression and when it's already on. And I think that is more of an important issue. You lose a house, you lose the house, but you don't want to lose the firemen that are going into trying to put the house out because you didn't take the right steps in the first place. Right? And if everybody said, well, we'll just stand around with the marshmallows and let the house go, then I think that's one way of looking at it, but we'd never, when the fire starts and you're concerned there's somebody in there, you're not going to treat it that way. So, you know, you've got to go to the side that says you got to do what's necessary. And I don't know about what size, we could talk about the size, but certainly is at some point you need to have some sort of suppression going on, especially in a rural community. That's going to take a while for the fire department to get there, so that there is some protection for the firefighters that are going in. That's and I would say that I don't think it's unreasonable, and we have always kind of, the board at any rate, as long as I've been on it, has always supported what the fire department has come up with. And I think that you guys come up with, you know, realistic things that you're not asking for the moon, but you're asking for for protection for both you and the community. So I'm all for it.
Oh, I get both sides. for
Yeah.
sure.
But I don't know what the right number is. How did you come up with
The-
the square footage?
So there was there's ISO and there's the NFPA standard that deals with water supply for fire suppression. And ISO was 4,800, NFPA is 5,000. So they're very close. But we also understand that maybe that's not a comfort level, and you want to look at a different number. We understand that. We selected the 4,800 because ISO, when they do their fire flows, that's when they start looking at buildings, even though they're a single-family home, being more of a commercial structure just because of the size and what's required. So that's where the number came from, and we're willing to discuss with you other numbers if you feel more comfortable with a different number.
Wayne, you also have in your 100,000 cubic feet. Is that based on?
In the current ordinance, for our commercial properties, there's cubic feet and there's a cubic foot and square foot number. One of the things that we hadn't talked about is the chief wanted to change the square footage on our commercial buildings. Leave the cubic foot figure, but change the square footage number to a lower number. Currently it's 10,000. He wanted to bring that more in line with the ISO or the NFPA fire formulas. So that was the second piece of the proposed ordinance that you had in front of you.
Are there any other thoughts?
No, I certainly would support this idea. I think based on today's world where people, so often buy a house and they're not thinking about that sort of thing. And if they knew that even with a huge tank, it's not going to do the job, a house that expensive, I don't think it's going to be that big of a financial burden. I mean, it's always a burden and you hate to do it, but I think it's worth it.
In many of these, are they seasonal or are they full-time that we're seeing these larger on the lake structures? The only reason I'm asking is that biggest issue with that is if they're unoccupied in the wintertime, the sprinkler system obviously freezing.
Right,
Or do you have to heat the structure all winter
or drain.
or drain?
Or drain, yeah.
Or drain.
Yeah,
Then,
yes.
but then if the structure goes, you don't have the sprinkler system, it goes off season.
Well, right. If it's unoccupied,
If it's
though,
unoccupied, right,
that's a different story as far
Right.
as going in to fight it.
right.
Or find it. I think, Wade, I have no way of knowing, right? I have no basis to make a decision on square footage. I'm not
Right.
sure anybody does.
And
But-
we, like I said, we tried to use a number that was supported with facts. It's not just an arbitrary number.
Okay,
It's
so
a
that's-
number that's supported
Is
with
it
facts.
supported when you, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but is it when you say supported by facts, is it supported by the amount of water flow that Raymond can bring to the property and the amount of water flow that would be required?
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
Is there any avenue in these size ranges for installing firewalls to, if you take a 4,800 square foot house and cut it into two 2,400 foot sections with a firewall, does that mean we don't need a sprinkler?
That's what that would mean. Yeah, we would need to write the ordinance to address that.
Right. That may be something to
That's a
think
good
about how we
idea.
can
Yeah,
handle
that's a
that.
good
Yeah.
idea.
When we talk about sprinkler heads or systems, that is depending upon the size of the property.
Right.
A 4,800 square foot property would need one head or two heads?
A 4,800 square foot property would still probably require that four-head, capable of flowing four heads. That doesn't mean four heads are always going to flow, but that the system's built to flow for four heads. Does that make sense? Like what we're
Yeah.
building currently in our residential homes in the subdivisions in the outlying area is two heads flowing. The system is designed and built for that flow rate. Most of the time, these fires are put out with one head flowing.
And they're-
That's how fast
Are they
acting and how quick.
strategically placed in the home, so like one's in the kitchen and one's in
Right.
the furnace room or something like that?
Yeah, the largest square foot area is an 18 by 18 foot area that one sprinkler head covers.
So if one goes off, it doesn't trigger all the sprinkler heads in the house?
No, it's not like you see on TV, that's for sure. The only time the sprinkler heads do that is like in an airport hangar. They're designed that way. Otherwise, it's one head at a time. The heat has to actually open up that head. So these fast-acting sprinklers, they're operating or opening up at 135 degrees. So that's a small fire.
Okay, so I think we okay with the size then? Anybody,
Yeah, I'm good with it.
4,800?
seems reasonable?
Do we want to, well, as far as,
I think we
we're
want
gonna
to
give
add in
him some
Bruce's,
direction here, as far as if we're gonna go to Bruce's point,
we are,
firewall, we'll need some clarity language as far as that goes.
yep.
And I think we should, and I apologize, I didn't probably look this closely as I should have, on renovations, at what point do we trigger the retro
Right.
system?
Were you comfortable with the retro?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And is it 50%? Is it based on value? Is it based on area?
It would,
volume?
it would make sense to mirror the retro requirements to what we already have in the ordinance. So we have a retrofit language in the current sprinkler ordinance for the commercial. It would just make sense to use the same language.
Do we have any state guidelines in residential? For when,
For a retrofit,
yeah,
not from the state, it's more from the national standard.
Is that based on value increase or?
It's value or a percent increase is
That's
how the
square footage.
language is usually worded. And that's not just us, that's, like I said, that's other communities around us have that same retrofit language.
Scott, if we're going to renovate a house, at what point does everything have to be brought up to code, new code?
Nothing existing. I mean, the only thing that it really goes after are smoke alarms. If a building permit is issued for renovation and the ability to install without removing any kind of finish, then the rest of the house has to be brought up to hardwired daisy chain smoke alarms. Doesn't really get into anything other than that as far as existing structures.
Right. Retrofit's probably the wrong word.
Yeah.
It's additions. It's adding on to the building. So you add on to the building, you go beyond a certain percentage or a certain dollar figure, then you're retrofitting the building. Does that make more sense?
I mean,
That's more accurate
Renovation,
than what I
basically.
said
call it
originally.
renovation or an addition, right?
Right, it's addition. It's not remodeling and you keeping the same square footage. It's actually additions. And that's how it's addressed in the ordinance, is under additions.
but
So if you got a 4,000 square foot building and you add, what, 400, or 800 or 799 square feet, you wouldn't necessarily
Trip the
trigger
ordinance.
it. But if you had a 5,000 square foot building and you added 1,000 square feet to it with an addition, you may be in line for a retro.
Maybe.
And that's based on value or?
It's value or percentage of the addition.
But if you had an older, large home that you were just not going to add on to, but just going to renovate,
Right.
would we not want the sprinkler system put in at that point?
Here's that our mechanism that we have now
Wouldn't require that.
would require that.
Right.
But
So-
to your point, if you're inside it, you're changing walls and everything else, it makes sense to do it
do
at that
it,
point. But
right.
I guess, I'm just gonna lean on these two to figure.
How would you capture that though?
Yeah, like a home flipper, right? Somebody goes
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
buys an old
Yeah, yeah.
home, and they
Right.
they don't change any walls or anything, but they just gut the whole place out and put, I mean,
You would want,
you'd want to do that.
Well, wanna
yeah.
do it at
I mean,
that
yeah,
point.
as I say, at some point you would have to
Assess the cost, I think.
assess the cost and the ability to put it in there as to what they've removed. You know, if they've come in and removed all the finish, It's just like an electrical. If they renovate a house and just kind of do Band-Aid work on it, but once they start removing finish, now if there's any kind of electrical issue that's exposed, they have to deal with it.
Oh, okay, that's what I was
They have to
that's what I
bring
was
that
kind of
up.
asking about.
But if they don't tear apart the finish, they leave it as is, there's nothing I have that allows me to say that they have to do any kind of repair.
Finish with sheet rock or plastic.
Yeah, I mean, some of them will come in and it's like, if it's cruddy finish, they'll just do 1/4-inch sheetrock on there and call it good.
So, excuse me for my construction ignorance here, but if you build a new home, obviously you're starting from scratch, you can fit everything in the way you want to, say it's 10 grand. If you're dealing with an older home, 50 or 60 years old, what is the cost then to try to fit that system in there, where your construction is, you're fitting things in spaces that were never sized to handle that? What kind of complications and costs do you?
But if you have a really older home that you're flipping or renovating,
Right.
that you would want that sprinkler system.
I
even
just want to
more
know
than
from a
your-
standpoint of all the dimensions and things change every 10 or
Yeah.
20 years of what's available in the walls and things like that.
It could, because I mean, if your intent on the old house is not to remove any finish, to run new piping out there could be rather
Yeah,
impossible at best, without tearing down the finish.
so but you would be involved in that though, right, at some point? One way or the other.
Well, yeah, one way or another. I mean, things do change that they don't have any intention of getting into this part of the house. But you go out there and you do an inspection, you see it tore out, then you have to kind of revisit it. But
So can we have verbiage in there that would give you something to fall back on that says, yes, at this point, at this size house, you are going to need there's enough changes that needs a sprinkler system?
you could, I mean, you could use a language like as far as changing things to a hardwired smoke alarm. Basically, if you're during the renovation have the ability to do that without removing, because a lot of houses, granted, you can get up into the attic.
Yeah.
And also might present another, as far as keeping some of that stuff frozen from freezing up in the attic and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's something you kind of have to weed through to see what would work, because it could get very expensive on an old house if you're not.
Right, and that's not the point, but I
Yeah.
think at some point, but it might, I mean, depending upon what's being done. So if we left it as at your discretion, depending upon the work that's being done,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of would rather than discretion, something black and white for me to fall back on.
Yeah, I
Because
understand.
they're going to argue with
That's
it.
a
Right.
pretty
Yeah,
heavy
that's
duty.
They're gonna argue pretty hard on that.
Yeah.
So if you have a certain percentage of the house is worked on, or like they do with assessed value of it, that could be a trigger. You just have to kind of,
so how about them working with Wayne and seeing if we can come up with something in the language
Yep.
that would trigger?
We can work on that.
So I think it's clear, new structures,
Yeah,
black and
that's
white,
not a
that's black and
problem.
white, but I think it's the conversion or retrofitting on existing structures
Yeah.
that's probably the tricky one. Because I think if somebody's coming in with a home, like anybody in a subdivision now, if it's on the plans or if it's in the ordinance, they know it's there, they gotta do it, they're gonna
Right.
do it. It's usually not a huge argument about it.
Yep.
It's in black and white.
Yep.
But when you get into renovations, then I think that's where people are gonna go, oh, crap.
and again, that could be possible, the same thing is that if they do a renovation, then maybe they don't have to sprinkle it, but they have to make that separation now a fire rated.
Yeah,
Assembly.
that would be another way.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of, it could be a way out that would be less expensive than a sprinkler, but and it keeps that under 480.
Is that something you think you can derive and,
Yeah, we'll see what we can craft up.
because we'll take what you've given us and we'll kind of, there's some commentary, some comment and advice for the board, but we can take that out, but we'll just kind of try to make it a little more black and white and fit it, and then we can maybe have a section in there that talks about additions and changes to an existing structure.
Yep. And then, I know that I talked about the issue of being outside of where the public water supply is. Currently, it doesn't have that language. We would add that language that 1,000 feet outside of where the closest hydrant on the public water supply is when this would kick in. Because on our current public water supply, we're dealing with a 16-inch main that gives us a lot of water, so that gives us the capability close to that public water
I would
supply.
almost argue that if they're on public water, we'd want the public sprinkler system, the water in the public sprinkler system, wouldn't we?
Yeah, what,
We can certainly leave it. It was just, I had mentioned outside
no,
a
I
number
wouldn't
of
change,
times.
yeah, I wouldn't change that.
Okay, very
If
good.
anything, it's an easier
Yeah,
Just leave it
easier
straight up.
system.
yep,
Yeah, because I think we're eventually gonna be narrowed down like Gorham or one of the other towns. We're narrowing into that eventually. At some point in the future, you can see all the homes and new construction are gonna require sprinklers. As it is now, it's only those from 0 to 4,800
yep.
square feet outside of subdivision that are still exempt. Which is, it's fair because there's a lot of affordable housing in there, but is safety fair? I don't know.
It was the subdivision off of Kineska Road that they came back and after it was all approved and complained about having to sprinkle. Remember that?
I wasn't here for
Yeah.
that, but I have
Oh,
read the notes from
yeah.
the meeting.
It was
yeah.
because the first person that bought the house would have to pay for the whole cistern system. And
Yeah.
he said it was a burden to put all that cost on that one owner or potential buyer.
Yeah.
That was the issue, it wasn't.
Is that Rosewood?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And then we put then the tank moved and everything else.
Mhm. All right,
So,
I think we're getting longer than this. What's up?
so I guess the next plan would be to try to get as much of this into red line versions
Yep,
for you to review. New ones, obviously, we'll just give you the verbiage. Won't need a red line, but we'll give you the verbiage. And so the next one will be, what will it be? Just, it won't be a workshop, will it?
well, unless is there
Because we're shooting
applications?
for March of our public hearing, so we could have another extended workshop like this, either before or after, because we do have one
We have the marina application.
We can do the marina application first, then we can do the workshop after, if that
Yeah,
works.
that shouldn't take us long, that marina application, should it?
I don't
mean,
think
I don't
so.
think
I don't
it's
think so.
pretty straightforward.
I think so.
Right? So just do the workshop. We may go a little late, would that be okay? Vice, meaning a
I mean,
separate
this time you'll have the red lines,
Yeah, and we've had the discussion. And
yeah, you'll have the
should
red
go.
lines a week before the meeting, so you'll be able to.
Yep.
have a better idea.
No PowerPoint presentation.
No PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, we need more animation next time.
So how many of those with Photoshop did you say? Only 3?
Well, I was looking at the swimming pool in one of them, I'm thinking, he's got
A lot of water right there.
Probably not nearly enough.
So anything else for tonight?
The only thing I do, the next meeting I'll have for you is I've got to catch up on one of the findings of fact when I wasn't here. They haven't done anything yet, but I got to get you those findings of fact.
Okay.
Other than that, you've just got the Port Harbor Marine.
And Will's doing that, right?
We'll be doing that one. I have a conflict with that, and then we'll focus on ordinances in anticipation of a public hearing in March. And hopefully weather holds out, so we don't have any cancellations.
Thanks for getting all the minutes taken care of, Mary.
You're welcome. My brain is now full of meal.
What was it before?
It was more like mashed potatoes.
So I think we probably do need a motion because we did actually open the meeting.
That's your turn.
Yes.
Second, all those in favor? We're done. Thanks, guys. Jim, thanks for moving us along.
We're trying. We're trying.